I don't know if you were able to share any of these sessions. If you have been actually listening into kind of the opportunities that German Mittelstand actually opposes or is providing to you guys, you probably know it's a massively large kind of group of companies that we are addressing. But even in Germany, we are kind of oftentimes a little bit unclear about who is the Mittelstand. So there's kind of different definitions. It could be anybody between 1 and 499 employees. It could be anybody between 1 and 50 million revenue. It could also be somebody who's a lot bigger. And we have quite a few companies who we perceive as Mittelstand. Also, classically, they wouldn't be counted as Mittelstand because they have more than 500 employees and they have more than 50 million revenue. And there's another criteria, which is a quantitative criteria, which is basically it is still owned and it still has private ownership, and the guys still have the business responsibilities. So that's another way of defining Mittelstand. And that makes it a very diverse group that we are in the end addressing and that we are actually kind of approaching. So that's a bit of a challenge which we have when we speak about Mittelstand. The other thing which is interesting for you guys is probably that it is also kind of in some sectors stronger, the Mittelstand, than it is in other sectors. And if you are kind of thinking back about Germans and about what we actually stand for, engineering, kind of the old heritage, then it won't surprise you that, you know, kind of the classically engineer-driven companies are the ones that actually are very strong in Mittelstand. So it's basically mining, construction, anything that's kind of machine production stuff. That is the typical Mittelstand that we are talking about. We have some more statistics, and because we cannot share the presentation, we will be sharing on the screen now. We will be sharing this with you afterwards. And again, apologies that my colleague has not been able to join us. So there's quite a lot of opportunity with regards to the Mittelstand, but as I said, it's very diverse. So the question is, what you need to understand first when you actually start addressing the German Mittelstand via channel is you need to really understand what segment are you addressing. So market segment, what are the needs, and then focus and be really clear on your targets. So oftentimes we meet startups or companies, and by the way, you can always address me with questions in between. Just type any questions. So we see a lot of startups that actually do not come as Mittelstand in general, but it's so diverse that that's not going to work. So it's better kind of to really take a small segment or a specific segment that your solution is best suited for, and then kind of take that one and actually try to focus on this specific segment. The next thing that you need to really understand is that direct sales to Mittelstand, because of the large number of which we have, the heterogeneous way that it's being set up is very difficult. So if you're really going for direct sales with the Mittelstand, that is something that is usually super tedious, very costly, and most unavailing. So we see a lot of startups who actually start off with direct sales approaches to the Mittelstand, and we see probably out of 100%, we see maybe 2 or 3% actually being very successful, and the rest, sooner or later, comes to realize that they actually need a good channel strategy. Now, the one thing that we would also like to point out, which you will probably not so we wanted to point out because you're kind of coming to the European market, is that the Mittelstand, and I don't know if you're totally familiar with this, but the Germans are more sensitive when it comes to security than a lot of other nations. So we've seen a lot of companies come and actually having been successful in the market, at one point really stumbling over the security issues. Now, your cyber, this session masterclass actually addresses kind of the entry from cybersecurity startups, but what we're saying now is basically for any startup trying to enter the market, you need to be really clear about the regulatory and the legal requirements that as a startup you need to fulfill. If you're not clear about this, it's something which any company, but especially Mittelstand companies, will kind of take a look at and will basically rule you out because you're then kind of not meeting the needs and pain points of these companies. The regulatory and legal requirements are really key to successful market entry. And they're also good triggers, by the way, kind of to approach. Now, if you're actually kind of going with the channel, which we recommend, and that's the topic of our masterclass today, if you're actually really looking into channel strategies, you need to really choose the right channel partners and the right channel strategy based on your targets. And what we did is kind of, we segmented this for the purpose of this masterclass, and it's something which is basically also commonly segmented into a group of 0 to 49, 50 to 499, and larger being the ones that are kind of still family owned or privately owned and still kind of run the business kind of independently, so they don't are not kind of dependent on the stakeholders. So what is it you need to do? If you're aiming for really small companies, 0 to 9 or 10 to 49, you need to bear in mind that these companies often don't even have an IT manager. The very small ones for sure don't, and the other ones often don't. They actually use kind of service provider. And the way they are being influenced is oftentimes through consumer-rich media. So it's kind of often the CEO, other people in the company who are semi kind of looking after the IT issues and the as part of this also the security concepts. They would actually then kind of be forming opinions very much based on what they see in consumer media, mainstream media, dailies, and so forth. And selling to them kind of, if you are actually trying to sell it to them kind of in a direct way, is basically selling in a classical retail channel. And again, you need to understand what the segment is you're selling for to determine which retail segments are appropriate. But we often see kind of companies kind of really going to classical wholesale resellers, retailer. So it's kind of a very difficult market where you need to have lots of money, lots of budget for brand awareness issues, and also very good relationships to the key retail channels. Very tedious and oftentimes not so successful. The other segment would be kind of selling to companies between 50 and 250, 249, which would be the classical Mittelstand end, or kind of companies up to 499, which is kind of more the European definition of Mittelstand. Here you have kind of a couple of channel routes. One is reseller, one is distributor, ISVs, VARs, and IT service provider. And again, know your segment. You need to really be very clear which segment you're addressing, because you have specialized resellers, specialized distributors, specialized value-added resellers who are kind of approaching different kind of segments, are focusing, are specializing. So the clearer you are about the segment, the easier it's going to be for you. And then there's kind of what we call the large Mittelstand, which is basically everything that is statistically on a quantitative measure kind of not sufficiently small, but is still, as we pointed out a few times, Mittelstand because of the way they kind of see themselves, approach themselves. They run the business. It's a family-owned business oftentimes. It's owned privately, and they can basically make all the business decisions. If you're going after that kind of Mittelstand, you need to kind of target value-added resellers and system integrators and come up with an appropriate strategy to address kind of strategic partners. And at the same time, while you're doing this, you still have a key account strategy, which means you're nurturing your key account directly. You're building relationships, you're drilling deeper into the organization kind of to get a deeper understanding of what their requirements are. And you're then kind of passing on these kind of leads to the VARs and system integrators that are dealing with them. So that's basically what's happening. I'm quickly checking if anybody is, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to really start into the chat. So with that said, the question now is, what are the pillars kind of, what do you need kind of for a successful partner business, channel business? So there's kind of 4 pillars which we came up with, Gunther and I. Gunther, who's still on the telephone and listening in. Firstly, sales. You need to have incentives, tools, and you need to give leads to the channel. The channel oftentimes does not have the resource and the focus kind of to actually look into specific leads for your specific solutions. So it's all about kind of providing them with good leads that they can use kind of to do the business. The second thing is partner. You need to allow for a good pricing model, a good margin, sufficient revenue, and sufficient and kind of cover their costs. So one thing which is maybe important for you, if you are looking for a dedicated partner management in a channel, then you usually have to be able to provide up to 250k euros revenue to this specific partner, and then they will basically give this dedicated partner to you. If they're not giving this to you, which often happens to startups, you'll need to be kind of giving them something else, going back to what I said earlier, incentives, tool, leads, and so forth. And then the final thing is with regards to the market, it's all about education and training. So if you're coming to the German market, trying to approach and sell to the Mittelstand, what you're probably doing is going in with a new solution. You have to have a really good understanding of the pain points, and you need to have a perfect understanding of the needs that the Mittelstand company that you have decided to focus on are actually having. So it is important for you that you start educating them. And you also start educating the partners, because a partner can only sell as well as he has been educated. And they don't have an exclusivity for your solution. So you're kind of one of many solutions that they are selling. Ideally, you're a complementary solution to the ones they have been selling previously, or you have some USPs. However, you still need to educate and train them up. So it's kind of two things that you're doing: training the market, training up the partners, educating the market, educating your partners, giving good pricing, margin, revenue prospects to your partners, and having good incentives, having good tools, and providing them with leads. And if you're really going along the route of the channel strategy, we also recommend very strongly for you to have good and agreed upon KPIs. Without channel partners, just to reiterate, it is super difficult to really come up and be successful in the sales to the German Mittelstand. So if you have decided to go that route, here are a couple of things you will need to do. Firstly, you need to constantly enable your channel partners. And that means the stuff that you have to develop from a channel marketing perspective includes everything: battle cards, roadmaps, marketing campaigns, sales trainings, and as I mentioned before, any lead generation and PR. The marketing campaigns are aimed at two audiences. One is really kind of trying to create demand from your end customers, and the second element is kind of generating kind of interesting channel partners, because as I mentioned before, depending on the segment that you are kind of reaching, if you're going for the really large ones, you'll need maybe a handful of really good kind of channel partners. But if you're addressing the middle segment between 50 to 499 or 50 to 500, there's kind of more channel partners that you will need to acquire in order to be successful. And that means that you have kind of, a full pipeline of kind of potential channel partners, ones that you actually sign deals with, the ones that you can address. So that's kind of enabling them, kind of giving them the right information, targeting them, coming up with a proper channel partner program. Also means stuff like coming up with a strategy on kind of gold, silver, platinum partner, which is kind of the usual stuff, the different incentives, the kind of level of involvement that you're giving to them. So come up with a proper channel strategy. Speak to the channel partners to kind of determine if that works. The next question would be really, you have to hire a really good channel manager, channel partner manager, and we see that quite a lot. So it's basically if you're kind of coming into the industry without having either the contacts to kind of bigger corporations, which is not the topic, of course, today, but kind of, and you do not have the kind of contacts to the channel, our best recommendation to you would be kind of hiring a channel partner manager who already has some contacts. And depending on where you want to go, we recommend hiring somebody with an international scope. Also, of course, if you're trying to conquer the German Mittelstand, having worked in Germany and having built relationships with the German channels that you're actually then trying to approach is perfect. But sooner or later, you will also kind of, if you choose to go to Germany as your first foreign market in Europe, you will need to adapt to other markets, and it's important kind of to have somebody who has this international perspective, so that they can basically, in the decisions that you're making from the outset onwards, kind of figure out what is the appropriate messaging for the German market, and how can you basically create it in a way that you can easily tailor and adapt it to kind of other markets moving forward. So that's basically the tips which we are giving you. So I don't know if you have any questions. I would be kind of posting this into the chats next the presentation for everybody. Oh, super, Gunther has joined us. That's perfect. So open for your questions now. Gunther? So here's a question: what is the typical margin expected? Gunther, can you actually, we can't hear you, so I still have you on my phone. The typical margin that is expected is a question that Jilly has been asking us. So we, also for now, oh, Gunther, now finally in the picture.
Yes, finally it worked. Hi, everybody together. So the margin is an interesting piece of the whole structuring a deal. Usually it's between 30 and 50%. If you go to the SMB market and you want to have a large carrier like the Deutsche Telekom, which costs you years to get into it, they always ask between 45 and 50% on it. However, if you once in and it works well, they make a fortune for you. But usually it's between 30 and 50%, and it depends on how much effort the partner is able how much effort you are able to give to the partner, like what was described before, incentive, training, etc. But don't make a number between 30 and 50%. That's the margin the partner is expecting.
And the one thing I did forget to mention is we see a lot of times that Israeli startups tend to kind of go to the market in a slightly different way. So what they do is they identify somebody who either is kind of a representative for the organization and has a couple of cyber startups and is trying to sell, or they find an independent kind of salesperson who has relationships. Now, the independent salesperson, who is, by the way, also quite expensive oftentimes, will work if you are trying to sell to kind of big corporations, and if you manage to find somebody who has ultra strong relationships with the corporations. For the Mittelstand and building the relationships, we don't often, if not to say very seldom, see that being a successful strategy.
I agree. You have to.
So that's
the classical Mittelstand. You need to have a good partner in between, which can scale you up, and this is usually tough to do it with a sales rep in between.
It's also a question of kind of, as Gunther said, scaling up. So basically, if you're kind of really focusing on the German market, you're really determined to be successful, the scaling up is simply not possible with this person. This person is simply an interim person for a year or maybe 1.5 years. And as I said, oftentimes we see that the companies kind of tend to kind of terminate relationships after a year because they have not kind of been able to find what they wanted to find.
Yep. So look at you must look for a good channel manager and not a major account manager on that. It must be a channel account manager to enable the channel. And one thing in Germany, which is different to most of the other countries, is location-wise, it's very diverse in here. You have from Hamburg down to Munich, to Berlin, to Leipzig, to Stuttgart, to Düsseldorf. everywhere and in between, there's a lot of companies and a lot of your mid-sized companies you're targeting. And it's not like, for instance, in France, you have Paris and that's it. And you have a little bit down there in Marseille and a little bit in Lyon, but this is negligible. So this is a subject you need to take into your planning.
So here's a question from Alon about kind of many cyber solutions are perceived as grudge, vortex, insurance, necessary evil, kind of compliance evil, as I pointed out earlier. And do you see opportunities for cyber to be business enabler, drive new revenues? Now there's kind of an official kind of answer, which would be yes, and the unofficial answer I would say is probably no-ish, because in reality, oftentimes people kind of do buy the solutions, the security, because it's something they need to do for compliance reasons and for regulatory reasons. That's kind of the key driver. And just as a side note, because I forgot the introductions because of the bumpy start, Gunther is super experienced in sales. He has actually worked with Cisco many years ago, and he was kind of Cisco's European employee number 3 and kind of managed to do a lot of sales. And it's now a venture partner and also kind of a very sales focused person. And I'm the managing director of the Digital Hub Cybersecurity in Germany, which is part of the National Digital Hub Initiative. And coming back to the regulatory and compliance issues, we currently have only in German a brochure about these. As I pointed out, it's something that each startup, even if you're not cybersecurity, should take a look at. Run it through Google Translator. We will be issuing the English version in the first quarter of 2021. And if you are contacting us, we will also be giving you more tips kind of to see where that is.
This is very important what Ute is saying. If I give you an example, I just consulted last week a startup which I make on invest in, and however they have a problem. They're working with banks together, with large banks and insurance. And for large banks and insurance, they have to have this. They have to have some compliance every year, necessary and ongoing tests. And therefore, they are looking for slim and slick solutions where they can meet this compliance, security compliance, and. So you need to find your way into that, how to get through them, because they obviously don't have their own IT department. I think that's exactly roughly around 100 people. I mean, they have a little IT department, 3 people, but they're not into security. But they have strong local partners and carriers they work with. So this is important. What Ute said before is like, know your market and know your partners for that. So for them, the Deutsche Telekom may be not right, or maybe of the traditional value-added reseller, but the local value-added resellers, and how to scale up there. This is something you need to know where you fit perfectly in, or you sell your solution via the banks itself. Say, hey, all of the people who have to work with us, they have to use these tools, this kind of insurance, this kind of methodology you need to think about.
Okay. And on a final note, because I think we are running out of time, just wanted to point out, however, as I said, this has two sides of the answer. You will need to talk about business pain points. You will need to talk about the kind of prospects cybersecurity solutions actually will be giving to a company. It is something where you need to kind of actually communicate all these buzzwords about business enabling, and really actually, in reality, it is so that if you have an unsecure solution, you cannot basically do some businesses. But the key point, the key driver is really kind of the compliance stuff. So if there are no more questions, Chili, are you still with us? Then we're really sorry for the bumpy start. We tried to enter kind of since for a bit, but managed to have this work out. In the end, if you would like to see the presentation that we had prepared for you, do not hesitate to reach out to myself and Günther, and we would be very happy kind of to share this with you. It was great kind of to talk to you, and we wish you all the best with the couple of next sessions and all the nice, interesting, cool food stuff. So enjoy, and I'm if you are entering the market. Lots of luck and see you next time. Have a good day.